Welcome to the Successful Nurse Coach podcast. On this podcast, Laura
and Shelby, both board-certified nurse coaches, show you how to make as much money as you want in private practice as a nurse coach.
Welcome to the Successful Nurse Coach podcast. It is Laura today. I'm so happy to be here with you. It's pouring rain here in my office and studio. And so if there's a little bit of background noise, it's for your enjoyment. Today, we're going to talk about an overview between online versus in-person coaching and kind of some of the pros and cons. And I know as a new coach, I assumed I would only do in-person coaching, and I was the exception. I think most people wanted to do online coaching, but I just wasn't comfortable with Zoom. I wasn't super present on social media. I wasn't a really online person at that stage in my journey. And I always envisioned having my own cute little decorated office where clients could come and I would serve tea and it'd be cozy chairs and beautiful aesthetics. And I'd create this experience. And I was trained in healing touch. So I had a table and I would do healing, energy healing infused with sessions. And I had my office open for a year and I loved it. So I've done both. And then the last 5 years has been all online, except for retreats and in-person events that we do where there's lots of in-person parts to that. So I have a very good grasp on both. And I want to talk in depth about both of them. What's interesting is when 2020 hit, online coaching, online therapy, online everything really changed forever, right? Now, most people know how to sign into Zoom. They've had to for something. It's easier than ever to have an online practice. So I want to also acknowledge that when I started before 2020, it wasn't as prevalent. So you truly have an option to do both. So I'm going to compare and contrast them for those of you newer in your journey or contemplating what you'd like your practice to look like. I think it could be so helpful to imagine it, what it could be for you, and the pros and cons, and probably things you haven't thought of. So in-person coaching simply means that you and the client are physically present with one another for the session. And that can be done in your own private office. It can be done in an office in your home. Obviously, there are some stipulations and safety things that you'd have to figure out, but lots of professional coaches see clients in their home. You could rent a room from another wellness center or from some other provider, or you could share a room with lots of different providers. Like there are share office spaces with family therapists and counselors, and those spaces are great for nurse coaches. So there's lots of options for the where. In certification, we had students find clients and meet them at the library and reserve quiet rooms at the library. That's available. We've had people meet people at the park and coach on a park bench. Meet people, this is not ideal, I had to do this as well, but to meet people in a coffee shop and just sit in a quiet back corner to have the session. Ideally, it is totally private, it is distraction-free, and it's quiet. And when we talk about setting the healing space, there are certainly things in the environment that you can do to really enhance the feeling of the session itself. I'll tell a quick story about going to see Steve Hardison and having a session with him. So you arrive at his home and he first takes you through his backyard. He paints your name on the wall. He flies a flag in your honor. It's this whole ceremony, basically screaming that you're important and that you matter and that he's been waiting for you. And then he talks very sternly about the agreements, about his sanctuary, his coaching space, how it is where magic happens, that it is very sacred, and it is important to acknowledge that before you walk through the doors. And when you sit on his couch, you know that there's been extraordinary people sitting on that couch as well. And the whole experience was fabulous. It was overwhelming. I can really see the care and the immense reverence for the in-person coaching experience. He does not, to my knowledge, do paid coaching online. It's only you have to fly to him and go to his house. He's created his practice that way. There are pros to this. There's a stronger personal connection. There's more nonverbal communication and cues are more apparent. You can be really immersed in this environment that you have some control over. You have opportunities for hands-on activities or demonstrations. You could stand up and say something loud. You could sit on the ground on a yoga mat, and you could do a mindfulness or have the client lay down or do energy work. There's infinite ways for an in-person coaching experience to be extraordinary. So I want to give you, those are all the benefits of it. And then some of the cons is it should cost more, and it does cost more. If you're doing in-person sessions, we had somebody at our farm the other day that Evan coached. We have a beautiful pavilion. We have a huge koi pond with running water. So the setting's ideal. And he said he sat out there and they both had tea and they're both in the wicker rocking chairs with the water. And he led his client through a mindfulness, and that the session itself was extraordinary. But he did say, 20 minutes before I was prepping the space, and about 15 minutes after, I was saying goodbye and showing him to his car. So the whole session experience took longer. It took more work. And he said it took more energy or different energy. And so if he were to consider coaching somebody full-time in person, that he would consider raising the price because it felt like more work to him. So I want to lay that out for you as just a part you might not have thought of. You also have the clients who have to travel to you. So if you have a 1-hour session with your client, they live 20 minutes away, they've got to block 2 hours out of their schedule. Now, I'm currently seeing an in-person hypnotherapist, and it's about a 45-minute drive to his home where he has his sessions, and it's on the water in East Tennessee. You're driving. It's a beautiful drive. And I'm doing this purposefully because it has me sign out of my office 3 hours a month. So I sign out for 3 hours. I drive an hour. I have my hour and 15-hour, 20-minute session, and I drive home, and I get to really feel like that time is for me, as opposed to being in my office where I work, 30 to 40 hours a week right now, and having my session there in the same environment that I work. And for me, I like the drive. I'm making it part of the experience. But for others, that might be a make or break. They might not have 2 hours to sign out of work, or it might be too late for you or too early for you. So just things to consider when you're thinking about in-person coaching. A couple of the other pros of in-person coaching is, depending on the kind of practice that you have, you can create experiences. I've known coaches who've coached on paddle boards in the middle of the water, coached in canoes, coached in kayaks, coached on hikes, coached on walks. I've had clients meet at the beach to have their session on the sand with the waves hitting the shore and doing mindfulness. I've had clients who are working on fitness, and they met with their coach to do more strenuous hikes. And then at the pauses, they would do like 30-minute coaching breaks. That's so cool. There's no rules here. If you can't imagine your whole life being in an office, then in-person coaching could be for you. And it could be a destination coach. You could host intensives at beautiful hotels and have your clients pay to come stay at the beautiful hotel and have your sessions at the hotel for 2 days. And that could be what you sell. There's so much flexibility here. So I don't want to make it sound like in-person coaching's not good. It's great. It's just very different. So pros and cons of in-person coaching, I've kind of given you those. I want to talk about the overhead cost as well. Very rarely in the beginning of practice, and to be quite honest, as we scaled, I was kind of shocked at what our overhead costs are. People look at Shelby and I's company, and they think that we are making $1 gazillion. And that's just not true. The bigger a company is, the lower the profit margin is, because the bigger a company is, the more expenses and overhead expenses you have to pay. So for our practice, we have client gifts, we have retreat planning and retreat execution. We have lots of software that we pay for every month. We pay for software to host our courses. We have a full-time support person who kind of does all the back end stuff. We have expenses around our marketing, our podcasting, our editing. There's lots of things that add up. So when a client pays us for one of our programs, Shelby and I aren't splitting $5,000 half and half. We're splitting $2,000 half and half. We're probably in the end making about $1,000 each per $5,000 client fee that we then pay personal taxes on. And so I don't know that when we're in the beginning stages of entrepreneurship, we think that way. So I wanted to just give you that. And I believe for most, in-person coaching has a higher overhead. So in the end, your take home will ultimately be lower. By how much, that's up to you. My office that I had was $500 a month. It was my own office. I could go there 7 days a week, anytime. And so that was $6,000 for the year that I paid just for rent. And then it cost me about $2,000 to make the office pretty and how I wanted it. And then it took gas and time driving to the office back and forth. I needed something at home to print. I needed something at the office to print. So you had to kind of buy two of each for some of the officey things. And so it's more overhead than having a home office and coaching online. Now, people will say, well, yeah, but those are write-offs. It's like, true, they are write-offs, but they still decrease what your actual take home is. So another thing to be aware of. Now we're going to talk about online coaching. And I would say, 80% of the nurse coaches, 85% of the nurse coaches we work with only coach online. Another 10% coach both ways. And then I don't know that there's any coach I know that only does in person, but there are certainly coaches doing in-person coaching, especially in organizations. So I'm going to give you some of the pros of online coaching. First one is flexibility in scheduling for both the coach and client. Realistically, if your session's 50 minutes or 55 minutes long, the client and you really only have to block off an hour. I suggest more for prep in the beginning and to integrate and have some time in between. But really, you can get away with an hour slot to serve. You have the ability to coach global clients. You can coach clients from all over the world. And that's really exciting. Your total addressable market goes from 20 miles from your house to the entire planet. That's kind of cool. There's really no travel time, and your only cost is your software. And that software for most coaches is Zoom, which I believe is like $15 to $30 a month, right? So if you compare and contrast $500 a month to $15 to $30 a month for your Zoom, that's fantastic. It's cheaper. You can have an easier integration of digital tools and resources. So I'm going to be doing a workshop tonight called Get Coached. And I have some slides, some things to help me teach and to serve my workshop. In person, it'd be harder to do that. Or I'd have to have AC software or AV software where I could have a screen, or I could have a projector, or I could have a flip chart. So there's just more as opposed to just sharing your computer screen. So there's a little bit more ease of integration of digital tools and resources. And I love walking to my office is about 40 feet from my house. It's a she shed barn that we did earlier this year that smells good. It's so cute, has awesome lighting. I decorated it like a moody cave instead of a light bright space, which I've always coached from a really light bright space. With an air conditioner so I can temperature control it. I can play music out here. I have no kids banging on the door, hopefully. I love walking from my house to my office because that signifies that I'm on and off work. So I really like that. I really like that. And that's worked best for me working from home because I still have a separated space. For most of us, when we first start, we're coaching from a corner of a bedroom or from possibly our own office. But a lot of times we don't have the setup for that. And so it's awesome. You can walk right over to your kitchen table and serve. But the drawback there is that it can feel, you have to be more intentional to really make it feel like there's a separation between a session and work and the mundane. I feel like if you have an online practice, one of the other beautiful freedoms that we get is we can travel and coach. So if you go on vacation, you're really just paying attention to time zones and you need your laptop. And I always bring a ring light. I always bring a mouse. By people, bring a mouse. Even if you think you don't need a mouse, bring your mouse. It's super easy to pack and you will, if you use a mouse at home, you will want to use a mouse on the road. Some people have no problem with it. This is one of my big pet peeves. So you can have more flexibility. If a family member was sick and you needed to go, this just happened in our masters, you needed to go be with a family member who just had surgery. You could bring your laptop and you don't have to miss work and you don't have to reschedule sessions. So that's really fantastic. And if you have a primarily in-person practice, having proficiency in coaching online is helpful because you can do a hybrid. I think that we very rarely imagine that we have the freedom to practice however we desire to practice. I think feeling really confident in person and feeling really confident online is good. And in all honesty, Zoom, the first time I ever used Zoom was in my nurse coaching certification. This is prior to 2020. And it did not feel comfortable. I felt sweaty and activated and uncomfortable on Zoom for 18 months, if I'm being really honest. Now, Zoom is like an extension of me talking to you here with a camera and a microphone and a ring light on a screen. You might as well be sitting right here and me talking to you. It's that comfortable. So getting really, really acquainted with and accustomed to both, like be able to do both without any fear, have that flexibility. I think that's the beauty of the world we live in today. I know there's also digital visas so that if you are young and you could be older too. I'm saying young just because that's the archetype. But if you are wanting to travel the world and you're a nurse and you just want to make enough money so that you can go travel the world, having an online coaching business, getting it established is fabulous. How cool is that? To go to a country that has a lower cost of living because you're making a certain amount of money in your online business, you can go and get a visa and spend a few years. I think people have a lot to say about social media and the internet, and there are lots of negatives, but holy smokes, there's lots of possibility too. There is so much possibility. Now, one thing I think people get distracted about is it's one thing to decide how you're going to fulfill your coaching, right? You're going to either fulfill it in person or you're going to fulfill it online. But for marketing, you're probably going to want to market online, even if you're an in-person coach. So let's say that you want to be your town's go-to life coach or your town's go-to wellness coach, but you want to be well known so that everybody knows who you are, what you do, and you are the person that everyone knows about in your local town. I think that's a really great strategy for a nurse coach because chances are there's no other nurse coaches in your town. So you could really dominate the market. You're going to create a Google listing to list your business. You're going to have a website over time that really describes who you are, who you help, how you help them, how to get a hold of you. And you're going to have some kind of social media presence. If people hear about you, they can go creep you. They can see your face, they can hear your voice, they can read your words. They can have intimacy with you when you're not physically with them. And that will improve the amount of people that reach out to you for coaching in your town. I feel like when I was the go-to nurse coach in my town, I feel like that was an unfair advantage for me. There was something, the town I lived in was so cute. And we had a downtown that was historic. And my office was in a Victorian that was adorable, had its own bathroom in it and everything. I was upstairs from a Pilates studio. That's who I rented from. And I got clients who just walked by and came and knocked on my door. That was so cool. I think I did have a Google listing, but I didn't really know what I was doing back then. And I certainly didn't have a great website. But I would drop off flyers around town. I would constantly physically be out and about, which I think just gave me more opportunities to connect. And then when you live in a town and you hire someone from your town, there's more trust. I think you have to do more when you're marketing online to build trust. I have a funny story here. I hope Evan doesn't mind that I tell it. Babe, I know you listen. Sorry. I don't think you're going to care. I know you won't care, in fact. But yesterday morning, Evan flew to Colorado he had been seeing a coach online. He said, I think it's been like 18 months. And he's been really like wanting to find somebody that he looked up to, that he really resonated with. And I feel like the longer you're in coaching, the harder it is to find people like this. Like something about them that you're just like, I want to pay them to spend time with them because I want to absorb something from them that I can't put my finger on. And so this coach, he is doing a retreat where you fly into Colorado, then you camp on horseback, I think for 4 nights, pack in, pack out, and then you do some coaching along the way. But it's like this rugged dudes thing with a life coach. And he is so excited about it. And I was helping him getting ready to go. And I've been really busy and I'm going to have the kids for 5 days. And I could tell he was feeling anxious. It's like, I feel bad. I'm leaving for 5 days, kind of in the middle of a lot. And I said, yeah. And he's like, I'm a little nervous. And I said, what about? And he's like, he didn't say anything. I was like, about like meeting somebody on the internet and then just flying into a state and being off grid with a man from the internet? We both started laughing. At some point, the people from the internet, and likely if you're listening to this, you know me from the internet. You likely don't live in Maryville, Tennessee and didn't see me at coffee. You likely have seen my podcast or seen me and Shelby in a workshop. Like, likely this is how you found us, is online. And it just cracked me up that, yeah, there's a little more time needed to create the intimacy and comfort for people to want to spend money and time with you when you meet online. Everybody has different comfort levels with this. But if this guy was local, I don't think it would have taken Evan 18 months to hire him. There just would have been more in common. So never underestimate being the go-to, whether you're online or in person, in your area. You might as well set yourself up that way. Talk about yourself that way. I also think that local Google reviews on your Google page can be really helpful. And I just talked to a nurse coach yesterday that's getting clients. Several people have gotten clients from their Google listing, which, by the way, is free. So I highly recommend creating that. And we teach you how to do that in our course. Okay. I want to talk about some other more esoteric parts of this. For those of you who are empaths, which is, I'm finding many, many, many of you, in-person coaching requires better energetic boundaries. This I learned the hard way, especially with energy work. Holy smokes. When you are working with a client who's struggling or in a lot of emotional, mental, even physical pain, and you spend physical time in their presence, if you have leaky energetic boundaries, it can be very draining, more so than a Zoom call, I have found. So for those of you who are really sensitive, you're contemplating in-person coaching, figuring out how, and there's so many techniques for this, but there's ways to attune to your client and then close the session and detach and release from your client energetically. The only way I know how to do it completely is from a spiritual standpoint, where I am just a steward of the session. I come in and I am a steward of the container and this client's experience. I am not there to heal them, to help them, to ease their pain. That's not my role. My role is to hold space for their own process to do all of those things. And then when I step away from the container, I give it to God for me, give it to something bigger than me. And I have to trust that that's good enough. But taking burdens home with us and perseverating over the client and wanting to check in with the client and wanting to help with the client, that's a very like a nursing thing to do. And I just find that in-person coaches, if you don't have this nailed, you're going to have less capacity. I have had several nurse coaches go to networking events and they have the most incredible personalities and they create clients there. And this doesn't drain them. This energizes them. They go to like BNI or to Toastmasters or their local Rotary Club. They go to mixers. They're extroverted. They talk in person. They have the personality for this. This is incredibly, even people who identify as both, but it's incredibly invigorating for them. And there are some of us where going to large events with a big group of people that we don't know, we can do, but I'll be damned if I'm doing it weekly. I would rather work on social media 10 to 20 hours a week than do a 2-hour in-person networking event, because my nervous system in that environment, it's just not my way. So noticing that about your own energy and experiment. I think if you're in certification or you're starting Nurse Life Coach Academy, if you can try both, you might as well try both and compare and contrast it. When you're in this like learning and beginner's mindset, do what feels comfortable and then maybe just try some other ways and see how you like and feel about it. I think that a great coach is versatile. They can coach in person and they can coach online. And at some point, they really all mesh and just feel like the same thing. I would love, for those of you who are already in practice doing either one of these, I would love to share case studies with new students. So if you wouldn't mind, if you're getting this email or you're seeing this on social media, or even if you want to just leave a comment on YouTube or in any of the podcast programs, I just want to hear more about how you have found your footing and where you like to practice best. Is it all online? Is it all in person? Is it a hybrid? And kind of how and why you arrived there. I think it could be incredibly helpful for the new nurse coach to hear some of these case studies. All right, guys. Well, it was a pleasure to be a voice in your ear this morning. I hope that this is helpful. And of course, if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to us. We don't mind responding. I keep telling people we're not too busy. We're busy. We are not too busy to respond to nurse coaches. That will always take precedence over any other thing in our business. And we get texts from you guys, we get emails from you guys, we get social media comments from you guys, and we love it. And I love hearing that this podcast was a helpful part of your journey. I often hear you guys give away so much value for free. And it's like, yeah, we do. We absolutely do. We are providing what we wish was available to us when we graduated. And the deep integration and knowledge of all these things that we share is why our programs are so potent. So I forget if we are enrolling or not. The time this is live, most likely it'll be close to the end of our Make the Leap enrollment for 2024. That is our entry level program. We'd love to see you there. I think it's going to be either Shelby or I hosting this Make the Leap this year. So if you want to come spend 10 weeks and have either Shelby and I be your coach to take what you're learning here and in our course and make some magic, we'd love to have you. Have a wonderful day.